We use words a lot like enlightenment, samadhi, awakening, transformation. What are we actually talking about? How can we make it practical for people who are listening and reading and coming to me in sessions or going to other healers or therapists to know what we're looking for? And we're not talking, or at least I'm not talking about a peak experience. I'm talking about the integration of an experience into a sustained new way of living. And so when I thought about awakening, I think about it, one, in a personal sense. How does Mike have an awakening in his life? How do I have an awakening? I shift from one perspective to a greater perspective. And then what is a more profound awakening in which you start identifying as the source itself? So that you're having relative and absolute awakenings. So there's two kind of levels of awakening that I've perceived in myself. And the first level is having an experience in which I discover or relearn or remember a profound truth. This is kind of a truth with a capital T. And then I embody that truth moving forward. So perhaps I wake up to something I was unconscious to. Perhaps I remember something deep about life that now I can embody in myself as I move forward in my life. This is one level of awakening, and we can have many awakenings throughout our life. We can have awakenings that come because of trauma, car accidents, near-death experiences, divorces. We can have awakenings based on the use of meditation, psychedelics, dancing, rituals. We can have a profound awakening in a conversation or reading a book. And then that significant worldview shift, perception shift, is now embodied in us, and we carry that forward forever, moving forward. That's a personal awakening. The second level of awakening is when we have an experience of being the source itself, where we dissolve the boundaries of our personal selves with the greater universal self or source. And now we've had what people might call a sense of oneness, where we are no different than the source or the mystery from which we are coming from. And so that awakening, I've had much less in my life, but I have had those moments where I have dissolved into the mystery, and I reemerge knowing that I am the mystery from which I am arising. And so that's a second, more profound level of awakening. And people use psychedelics for that often, where I find non-dual meditation, I can get to that place more frequently and readily without taking or needing any substances, where I know I am actually the profound mystery itself arising in the form of Mike. So I guess I want to make it really clear. I kind of defined awakening in two ways, and I'm going to make it concise. The first relative way of awakening, I call embodying the truth that you discover. And the second is being the living expression of the mystery itself. Walking around knowing you are the living expression of the mystery itself, and everything else is also. So when you meet another person, an animal, a situation, a tree, you fundamentally already know that is source greeting you, just as you are greeting it. It's source meeting source, being meeting being. So that's another form of awakening. And when I think about the relative awakenings, I have so many stories, as of course you would and everyone listening. And these happen all the time if we're really aware of what's happening. One of them, I remember, I was on a 5-day solitary meditation retreat in Central Oregon. And the third day of my meditation retreat, I was sitting, it was winter, so I was sitting in the cabin with the sliding door open, and there was snow outside and wind blowing snow around. And I was really still and quiet by the third day of meditation. And in my breathing practice, my body became a sense of translucency. It became transparent, where there wasn't breath coming in or out of the body. There was just wind or breath itself moving. And it didn't matter that it was moving inside or outside. It was the same air. And so I had this disappearing sense of Mike, a disappearing sense of self into the actual just becoming nature. My personality dissolved and it was just breath or air moving. And there was a moment where I had a voice that said, this is enlightenment. What's all your friends going to think? And I woke to the fact that there was some part of me that arose that had identified as this being Mike is now an enlightened being. And many of us have had this experience that we've identified, oh, I'm enlightened now. And what am I going to do? How everyone's going to see me as different. And many of us have that experience. The awakening for me was not so much in dissolving myself into spaciousness or into nature itself, was that I had an ego identity that really wants to attach to all these kinds of experiences and make meaning out of them. And that is separate from my own experience of just being nature itself. And it was really pretty profound for me, very simple to hear my own voice identify with the sense of enlightenment or awakening, whatever it classified it as, because then I started to have a little bit of distance between that speaking narrative voice and my own experience, which was profoundly different and much more spacious than this little voice. And I had an experience like that again. I was a monk and I was sweeping. It was 14 days into a meditation retreat. I was living with myself and a hermit monk. And I was sweeping, just sweeping, saying Buddha, Dharma, Sangha over and over in my mind for hours. And there was a dropping away of emotions, cognition, narrative self. I just became the motion of sweeping. And even the Dharma, Buddha, Sangha, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha mantra just left. And I am was all I experienced. The sweeping, the sounds, the heat, the swishing of the robes, and everything dropped. There was no more identity as me sweeping. There was no more identity as I'm thinking, or it was just dropped. And then very, very, very far away, as if someone was calling from a forest, like the next forest over, it said, who am I? Who am I? And for a moment, I didn't register. It was just another expression of the universe arising. Who am I? And then the fear of who am I, because the sense of self that Mike was totally dissolved, but it reemerged as this kind of a fearful, like, I don't know what I am then. If I'm not emotion, sensation, belief, perception, cognition, what am I? And that fear actually flooded me. Rather than just seeing it as another expression, I identified with the fear of not knowing what I was. And I remember becoming really overwhelmed by this confusion, not knowing. And I rushed up to the hermit monk I was living with, and I sat with him, and I explained I had dropped away, and I came back and became fully afraid because I didn't know who I was. And he just laughed, and he said, go back to sweeping. Like, okay. Because this is a natural part of the meditative process of dropping away and reforming. It's a constant stream of information, and some of which we really identify with. I identify with the stream of information that sounds like Mike in my own mind, a stream of information of the ego going, I am this, I am that, I am this, I am that. And it's a natural part. So that personal awakening was that I can be both. I can be both spacious, unlimited, formlessness, and then I can be the small little voice in my own mind that's afraid of losing its own identity. And so what I had to do is really integrate all of that. So when I start hearing my own voice going, I'm afraid, who am I, what's going on? I understand fundamentally that's just a part of me really attaching and identifying to its own sense of self. And I don't have to do much with it. I can allow it to be, and it goes, just like the sound of passing cars behind me, or the fan that's above me spinning. It's just movement. So even my own grasping sense of self that attaches to its own identity is just another piece of information passing through my awareness. And that was a profound, small awakening that I had. That's lasted 12 years since I've had that experience. What we want to talk about when we're working with people with trauma, anxiety, depression, is how to create a sense of space between the sensations, perceptions, and narratives that are creating depression, anxiety, trauma responses, to find a sense of freedom and well-being So so as a person with PTSD and pretty significant anxiety, I can tell you it's really uncomfortable to be in a body that has trauma responses that becomes super tight and agitated, intense, to have a mind that's constantly projecting situations that are fear-based, where I can get hurt, my loved ones get hurt. This is what I go through as someone with PTSD and anxiety. It's really uncomfortable. It's tense. So when I'm working with people, including myself, using awareness as the medicine for healing trauma, anxiety, for recognizing even the spinning down of depression, going down toward that swamp where stagnant energy happens, the body doesn't want to move, the mind goes down toward hopelessness, helplessness, apathy. Once we start having a sense of spacious awareness, we can start resting in that, even though we're feeling and identifying symptoms or signs of anxiety, trauma, depression. So the way I found healing is not by trying to get rid of anxiety. It's actually holding anxiety like a mother would hold a child who's wounded or hurt, and nurturing it. So we're actually working on various levels here. We're working on the physiological level, where I'm soothing myself with my own hands. I'm doing deep breathing. And through that, I'm able to really start creating a sense of safety, a sense of assurance that I'm here for myself. And then once I have that sense of safety, my physiology, my neurology, my nervous system relaxes. And then I'm able to start doing a little bit more of this work we're talking about, using awareness to become a little bigger than the thing I am experiencing, which is tension, anxiety, stress, fear. So the first thing I do is calm myself down. I assure myself I'm safe. And then I start breathing and expanding my awareness around me. So I see that my anxiety or my trauma responses are just one of many signals coming into me. There are sounds, there's lights, there's other sensations and emotions, there's other thoughts I can have. And now I see that I'm much more vast, and I'm not this constricted sense of self that's only based in fear or anxiety or hopelessness. I don't want to demystify awakening to something that just helps us with symptoms and, regulate anxiety. The excitement I feel is that everything, including anxiety, points back toward the source. That we might use even our own fear to guide us back to the mystery from which we come. Because once we have a relationship with spacious awareness, then we see that everything arising in it, including our own fears, narratives, depressive feelings, when we hold them in awareness with love, those symptoms themselves point back to silence and stillness from which they come. And so awareness is not only the medicine we use to get back to source, but pure awareness is the source from which things arise. So we're actually re-mystifying our own symptoms and our own signs of anxiety and fear. We're mystifying them with the source itself. So anxiety then becomes paired with this sense of mystery. And once we learn to rest in anxiety, we also get to rest in the mystery from which we come.